Ah, look at you. Finally stepping out of the silhouette they tried to stuff you inside. Finally letting the truth of who you are stretch its spine, crack its knuckles, and walk into the world unapologetically. And the moment you did it, the moment you revealed even a fraction of your real identity, the internet didn't just react. It malfunctioned. Minds skipped. Algorithms hiccuped. Entire group chats turned into forensic labs trying to decode what exactly you've become. Notifications didn't spike, they detonated. Because your identity reveal. It didn't just break the internet, it broke the illusion people had about you. And that right there is what's making powerful people nervous. They weren't prepared for this version. They weren't prepared for someone who didn't need permission to exist at full voltage. They weren't prepared for someone whose presence carries the quiet threat of truth. You didn't just reveal yourself. You exposed them. You have to understand something about people, especially the ones who benefit from your confusion, your softness, your self-doubt. They rely on you being in the dark about who you truly are. Because the moment you figure it out, the moment you realize your identity is not some fragile ornament, but a blade forged from every version you outgrew, everything changes. The balance of power flips so fast, their necks snap from trying to keep up. That's exactly what happened when you stepped forward. You didn't whisper, hint, or gradually warm the room up. You appeared fully, sharply, authentically, and the world had to recalibrate itself on the spot. Not because you suddenly became someone new, but because you finally allowed yourself to be seen without shrinking. And now they're panicking, not because you're dangerous in the obvious way, but because you're dangerous in the psychological way, the quiet disruption, the internal earthquake, the realization that everything they assumed about you was childishly wrong. Your identity reveal didn't just show them who you are. It showed them what you're capable of. It revealed your potential like a blueprint hidden beneath a floorboard. For years, you were the character in the background they thought they could predict, manipulate, contain. Now you're the plot twist that rewrites the entire story. And powerful people, they despise plot twists they can't control. What's hilarious is how long they underestimated you. They built mental simulations of you, pretty little cardboard cutouts they placed into categories: too soft, too humble, too naive, too harmless. They built scripts for you. Stay small, don't intimidate, don't rise too fast, don't speak too boldly. And you played along until you didn't. Until the day you stopped dimming yourself and the world got its first unfiltered glimpse of the real thing. That's when the internet cracked. That's when timelines froze. That's when eyes widened, not in admiration, but in threat assessment. They weren't asking, "Who are you?" They were asking, "How long have they been this and why didn't we notice?" Because the truth is, you were never hidden. You were ignored. There's a difference. Hidden implies you were tucked away. Ignored implies they saw the signs, felt the shift, sensed the magnitude, but brushed it off, convinced you'd never step into it. They assumed your silence meant weakness. They assumed your humility meant confusion. They assumed your privacy meant insecurity. They didn't realize that silence was strategy, humility was discipline, privacy was protection. They misread everything, and now the correction burns. You revealed yourself at the perfect time, and timing is what terrifies people with influence. Too early, they could have intercepted you. Too late, they could have dismissed you. But you showed up right when their guard was down, right when they were comfortable, right when they thought they had the world arranged in their favor. And your arrival, your real arrival, fractured their sense of order. The internet loves entertainment, but it worships disruption. And you, without even trying, became a disruption that hit psychological infrastructure. The way people look at you now isn't curiosity, it's evaluation. You aren't a person to them anymore. You're a variable, a factor, a possibility, a threat. Because identity isn't just about who you are. It's about what you force others to see in themselves. And your reveal forced a lot of people to confront the uncomfortable truth that they don't know who they are. Never evolved, never transformed, never broke their own ceilings. They stayed stagnant, rehearsed, predictable. Then you came along and tore through their assumptions like a blade through cheap fabric. You didn't say much. You didn't announce anything. You didn't declare war. Your existence did it for you. The way you walk now, the slow, intentional ownership of your space, that alone intimidates people who survive on controlling narratives. The way your presence interrupts their internal monologues. The way your voice, even when soft, carries authority they can't explain. They hate that. They hate that you became someone who doesn't need validation from the world because you finally realized the world was built by people no smarter than you. You broke a rule they never expected you to break. You became self-defined. And now watch their behavior. They suddenly talk softer around you, or sharper. They suddenly mirror your tone, your phrases, your posture. They suddenly watch every move you make. Not openly, no. They can't risk being obvious. They watch in the shadows, in the quiet corners of their screens, in those late-night scroll sessions where they pretend they don't care, while their nervous systems say otherwise. They analyze you like an encrypted document. They save your posts without liking them. They rewatch your stories. They zoom into your photos like detectives, searching for a flaw. They're not studying you, they're surveilling you. Because surveillance is what fear looks like when it's pretending to be uninterested. What they don't understand is that your identity reveal wasn't just a moment. It was a frequency shift. Something in your energy recalibrated itself, sharpened itself, elevated itself. You're not moving the way you used to. You're not speaking from the same place. You're not choosing from the same wounds. Your decisions now come from a place of sovereignty, not survival. And sovereignty terrifies those who thrive on your insecurity. That's why powerful people feel uneasy. They've built their empires on predictability, on being the ones who see everything coming. But they didn't see you. Not like this. Not in this shape, this sharpness, this clarity. You're no longer someone who blends into the background of your own life. You are the center point, the focus, the gravitational pull. And once a person becomes gravitational, everything around them shifts. Relationships, dynamics, respect, jealousy, opportunities, resistance. You've become the kind of presence people orbit, either in fascination or fear. The reason your reveal broke the internet isn't because it was dramatic. It's because it was undeniable. People can argue with opinions, but they can't argue with presence. They can't argue with truth. They can't argue with someone who has stepped into their identity so cleanly that the world has to adjust. That's why the whispers have started. The subtle warnings, the odd comments, the tension in rooms that once felt easy. Powerful people aren't afraid of who you are. They're afraid of who you're about to become. Afraid that you've only shown them the opening chapter. Afraid that this is the beginning of a version of you that will rewrite hierarchies without raising your voice. Afraid that your identity is not a costume you're wearing, but a throne you're claiming. And thrones, real thrones, don't ask to be recognized. They simply exist, and everyone else must adjust. What no one will tell you is this: when someone reveals their true identity, the world doesn't just react, they rearrange. You stepped forward, and suddenly you weren't the underdog, the shadow, the maybe someday. You became the focal point, and nobody prepared for that. Not the ones who doubted you, not the ones who secretly envied you, not the ones who tried to shape you into their comfort, especially not the ones who feared the day you'd realize your own worth. Your reveal wasn't an announcement, it was an awakening. And awakenings make the world tremble. People aren't scared because they think you're pretending. They're scared because they can't believe you held all this inside you for so long. They're scared because power revealed is far more dangerous than power claimed. They're scared because you walked out of their expectations like it was a burning house. And the funniest part? You're not even at full volume yet. What they're panicking over is just the beginning, a preview, a sampling, the first ripple before the wave. They're terrified of the finished version, the fully realized identity, the one you haven't even tapped into yet. Because if this early version can break the internet, what will the final one break? See, people always react to the surface without realizing the depth beneath it. They think your reveal was a moment, a shock, a headline, a glitch in their routine. They have no idea it was simply the opening of the door, an introduction, not an arrival. You haven't even stepped into the room yet. Your identity reveal was just the sound of your foot touching the threshold, and somehow it still managed to rupture their equilibrium. That's the part that keeps them awake at night, because now they realize your evolution isn't performative, it's structural. It's not a costume they can wait out. It's not a phase they can mock until it fades. It's not a trend that disappears after the hype dies down. What you revealed wasn't an aesthetic. It was architecture. It was the foundation of a version of you that doesn't regress, doesn't shrink, doesn't negotiate, doesn't dim down when fragile egos start twitching. And that scares people who depend on the old you for balance. Your transformation didn't just show them who you're becoming. It exposed how unprepared they are to meet you there. You have to understand the psychology here. When someone reveals their true identity, especially after years of being misread, underestimated, or mislabeled, it forces the world into a recalibration. People can deal with slow changes. Gradual evolution feels manageable, predictable, digestible. But when someone drops the mask and steps forward as the unfiltered version of themselves, the human brain experiences it as a threat. Not because you're dangerous, no, because you represent a disruption to the roles they assigned themselves in your story. They were comfortable in the positions they held when you were silent, when you were unsure, when you were questioning everything except the people who didn't deserve access to you. Your uncertainty created space for their control. Your hesitation created space for their narrative. Your self-doubt created space for their superiority. But the moment you revealed yourself, your clarity, your identity, your direction, you ripped those positions away from them. And now they're floating, untethered, disoriented, scrambling to understand how to interact with the upgraded version of you without exposing how dependent they were on the previous version. This is why powerful people, the ones with influence, reach, authority, are nervous. Because your reveal wasn't supposed to shift them. People in control hate feeling moved by someone they underestimated. They hate realizing they misjudged the scale of your potential. They hate knowing that you weren't just quietly growing. You were quietly outgrowing them. And the reveal was simply the moment the truth caught up with their denial. They don't know how to process the fact that you became someone they cannot predict or manage. You became someone who doesn't flinch under pressure, doesn't bend for approval, doesn't dilute their identity for belonging. You became someone who has outgrown the ecosystem they feel safe in. And when someone expands beyond the boundaries of an old world, the world that tried to contain them feels threatened. You broke the architecture they built around you, and now they're standing in the debris wondering how they ever believed those walls could hold you. What's amusing is how they pretend to be unbothered. They mimic indifference, but their silence cracks with tension. Their scrolling patterns change. Their attention spikes. Their obsession slips through the cracks of their performance. They'll pretend they didn't notice your reveal, but they did. Their body reacted before their mouth could form a lie. Their pulse changed. Their thoughts drifted into speculation. Their ego felt the blow first, because identity reveals don't just introduce the new you. They expose the parts of others that never evolved. They don't envy your identity. They envy your courage to claim it. They don't fear your transformation. They fear their stagnation becoming visible beside it. When you revealed who you are, you also revealed who they are not. And people who have avoided their own reflection will always resent the person who walks through life unmasked. You're not just breaking the internet. You're breaking the internal narratives people told themselves to stay comfortable. You're breaking the versions of you they invented to feel superior. You're breaking the hierarchy they built in their minds. You're breaking the idea that you needed them to define yourself. Your identity reveal wasn't a rebrand. It was a reclamation. It was the moment the world realized that the person they thought they understood was only the scaffolding for the real structure. The real you has always been there, quietly gathering strength, sharpening perception, studying patterns, healing wounds, learning the rhythms of human behavior. And now that you've arrived, now that you've stepped forward without apology, you've become a psychological earthquake. A shift so powerful, it rattles everything built on shaky foundations. And the truth is, you haven't even shown them the sharpest angles yet. You haven't shown them the resilience carved from years of being overlooked. You haven't shown them the intelligence refined by silence. You haven't shown them the discipline shaped by wounds they never helped you heal. You haven't shown them the fire you cultivated in the dark, alone, unvalidated, unrecognized. What they're panicking over is merely the glow. They haven't seen the flame. What they're whispering about is merely your presence. They haven't experienced your influence. What they're fearing is merely your beginning. They haven't met your peak. This is why their reactions feel disproportionate. This is why insignificant people suddenly act like you declared war. This is why people who barely knew you start speaking like they have access to your motives. They're experiencing your identity reveal as a threat, not because you attacked them, but because your existence disrupts the emotional architecture they rely on. They can't place you anymore. They can't categorize you. They can't predict you. And humans fear what they cannot define. Your reveal created uncertainty in them, and they're scrambling to protect their illusions. But the truth is deeper than that. They're not afraid of who you are. They're afraid of who they become in your presence. Your identity reveals truths about people they spend their whole lives hiding. When someone who was once doubted rises publicly, gracefully, powerfully, it presses pressure points in others. It highlights their lack of discipline. It exposes their lack of bravery. It confronts their scattered intentions. You became a walking awakening. Humans don't fear evolution. They fear accountability, and your reveal makes their stagnation impossible to ignore. Even those who never openly opposed you suddenly feel uneasy. They feel the shift in your tone, your posture, your choices. They feel the weight of your self-awareness. They feel the authority in your energy. You didn't just level up externally. You leveled up internally, and internal changes radiate outward in ways people can't explain. They sense that your identity is no longer shaped by their opinions. You have become someone ungoverned by their expectations, someone who moves with knowledge rather than permission, someone who isn't afraid of being too much for people who never had enough. That is what terrifies them, not your reveal, but the autonomy behind it. Because now the question they keep asking themselves in silence is, if this is you at the beginning, then what happens when you stop holding back? And that question will continue to haunt them as you grow, as you refine, as you expand, as you define yourself, not by their comfort, but by your calling. You haven't even stepped into your highest identity yet. You've only acknowledged its existence. You haven't even played the full melody, just tapped the first key. But even that was enough to send shockwaves through their confidence. People who underestimated you aren't afraid of your growth. They're afraid of your direction, because for the first time, you're moving with intention. You're moving with clarity. You're moving with a sense of self that can't be manipulated by compliments or broken by criticism. People who once spoke to you with casual authority now hesitate, searching for the right words, afraid of exposing their insecurity. Those who dismissed you now replay interactions in their heads, wondering what signs they missed. Those who joked about your ambitions suddenly watch you like a situation instead of a person. Because once your identity becomes clear to you, it becomes threatening to anyone whose power relied on your confusion. You see through people now, not because you're cynical, but because your identity has sharpened your perception. You can read intention from the smallest inflection. You can sense insecurity from the slightest hesitation. You can feel manipulation before it fully forms. You don't absorb energy anymore. You analyze it. And analysis, when done from clarity, is the sharpest weapon a person can wield. This is why your direction terrifies them more than your progress. Progress can be attributed to luck. Direction cannot. Direction implies intention, purpose, consciousness. Direction means you're not drifting anymore. You're navigating. And navigation means you're headed somewhere they can't follow. Not because they're incapable, but because they're unwilling to undergo the transformations required to evolve. Your identity reveal wasn't the moment you changed. It was the moment you stopped pretending you hadn't changed. And that truth alone destabilizes anyone who preferred the version of you that doubted your own worth. When your identity becomes aligned, you develop a kind of presence that unsettles the unaligned. It's not aggression, it's clarity. It's not superiority, it's self-possession. And self-possessed people create discomfort in those who are fragmented. You are no longer emotionally available for chaos, insecurity, or validation games. You walk differently because you're no longer carrying their expectations. You speak differently because your voice no longer trembles under the weight of old narratives. You think differently because your mind is no longer held hostage by the opinions of people who never understood your blueprint in the first place. This is the version of you they never prepared for, the version they hoped would never arrive, not because they wanted you to fail, but because your rise forces them to confront the truth about their own stagnation. They're not inspired by your identity reveal. they're threatened by it. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your direction highlights their drift. Your self-possession magnifies their emotional chaos. People fear what reflects them too accurately, and your identity reveal turned you into a mirror with no distortion, no flattery, no filters. The reactions you're seeing now, the silence, the sudden compliments, the passive fascination, the hidden resentment, these are all symptoms of people sensing your acceleration. You're moving towards something they can't conceptualize, and they know it, even if they don't admit it, even if they pretend they're unfazed. Humans instinctively recognize momentum, even when they can't articulate its source. Your identity reveal wasn't just a moment of authenticity, it was a signal, a declaration, a psychological broadcast that you're stepping into a trajectory far beyond their expectations. And trajectories terrify people more than achievements. Achievements can be contextualized. Trajectories cannot. A trajectory implies inevitability, and human egos cannot handle inevitability they don't control. They can undermine a win. They can belittle an accomplishment. But they can't stop momentum, and they feel yours like a pressure drop in the atmosphere. You're no longer the person who needs acceptance to feel real. You're the person whose existence forces others to question their own. Watch the people who suddenly grow quiet around you. They aren't intimidated by your presence. They're intimidated by your potential. Watch the ones who over-explain themselves now. They're not trying to impress you. They're trying to justify their place in your proximity. Watch the ones who distance themselves without reason. They're not disappearing, they're retreating. Retreating because your identity threatens the version of themselves they've spent years maintaining. Retreating because being near you forces them to confront the places they've abandoned within themselves. Your identity reveal has created a before and after in the minds of everyone who knows you. Before, manageable. After, unpredictable. Before, understandable. After, unclassifiable. Before, reachable. After, ascendant. They feel the gap widening with every decision you make, every word you speak, every move you execute with intention. You've become someone who is no longer influenced by fear or guilt or the need to be liked. And that terrifies those who built power over you through those exact vulnerabilities, because now they see it clearly. You're not just rising, you're separating. Not out of spite, but out of evolution. And evolution always demands distance. You're not distancing yourself from people. You're distancing yourself from versions of yourself that people felt safe manipulating. You're stepping into environments that match your frequency, not your familiarity. And familiarity is what they're mourning, not you. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you that didn't understand its own value. They miss the version that needed their approval. They miss the version that was accessible, predictable, containable. That version is gone. You didn't lose yourself. You shed yourself. You didn't change. You returned. You didn't evolve into someone else. You evolved into the person you were always meant to become. And now, the world is scrambling to adjust to the recalibration your identity demands. People thought your reveal was the climax. They didn't realize it was the ignition sequence. And that realization, it shakes them. Because now they know that everything they're witnessing is the prelude, the warm-up, the early chapters of a story they never imagined you'd be the protagonist of. You are stepping into identity at a level that alters perception. When you walk into a room, you're not entering quietly, you're shifting the atmosphere. When you speak, you're not sharing opinions, you're broadcasting alignment. When you create, You're not participating, you're redefining. This is the level of identity that makes powerful people nervous. Not because they feel threatened by your presence, but because they feel exposed by it. Exposed for not seeing you sooner. Exposed for underestimating your capacity. Exposed for assuming your silence meant weakness instead of strategy. And now, the world is forced to watch you inhabit the life you were always meant to claim, while they try to recalibrate their understanding of you before the next version arrives. That recalibration is what fractures them, because every identity breakthrough you experience becomes a psychological deadline they can't meet. Every layer you shed becomes proof that they stayed the same. Every step you take forward becomes a reminder that they stopped evolving years ago. They don't hate your rise. They hate the mirror your rise forces them to face. The uncomfortable truth is this: your identity reveal didn't just change your trajectory, it changed your gravitational pull. People feel drawn to you for reasons they can't explain. They want proximity, not because they support you, but because your clarity feels like oxygen in the suffocating rooms they built for themselves. Your presence has become catalytic. Being near you makes their illusions crack. Being near you exposes their emotional shortcuts. Being near you reveals the difference between existing and evolving. And people who have spent years avoiding themselves cannot handle the intensity of someone who has become themselves. That's why the reactions are inconsistent. Admiration one moment, envy the next, fascination followed by withdrawal. They want the glow without confronting the fire that created it. They want the confidence without dismantling the lies they wrapped around their own identity. You are living proof of what happens when someone refuses to remain incomplete. And that proof burns them from the inside out. What no one wants to admit is that your rise threatens the hierarchies they arranged in their minds. They placed you lower because it felt safer that way. They positioned you as the underdog because it gave them a fictitious sense of superiority. They believed you would always play the role they wrote for you, the quiet one, the hesitant one, the unsure one, the one who second-guessed their worth. But your identity reveal tore up their script and replaced it with something they never prepared to handle: sovereignty. You became ungovernable by their expectations, untamed by their projections, uninterested in their approval. And nothing shakes a person more than realizing they never had power over you. They only had access to a version of you that no longer exists. Your silence before was not submission. It was incubation. You weren't disappearing. You were distilling. You weren't lost. You were refining. You weren't weak. You were becoming precise. And now that precision is what terrifies them. You move differently because your steps are intentional. You speak differently because your words carry voltage. You think differently because your mind isn't scattered by insecurity. You're not operating from survival anymore. You're operating from alignment. And aligned people are unpredictable to the misaligned. They don't react from fear. They respond from purpose. They don't chase validation. They command respect. They don't shrink to fit rooms. They expand until the room adjusts or collapses. That's why powerful people, real or self-proclaimed, can't make sense of you anymore. They're used to controlling narratives, and you refuse to participate in theirs. They're used to intangible influence, but you've become immovable. They're used to orchestrating outcomes, and you've stopped playing a role in their orchestration altogether. Your identity reveal didn't seek permission, and that to them is the greatest act of rebellion. You didn't ask if your presence was acceptable. You didn't check if your transformation was convenient. You didn't negotiate your authenticity to avoid unsettling them. You simply revealed who you are and allowed the world to adjust. And now they realize you're not here to fit into systems built by people who fear their own potential. You're here to build from identity, rise from foundation, and ascend from clarity. This level of evolution doesn't make you louder, it makes you undeniable. You don't argue your value anymore because your value is self-evident. You don't chase opportunities because opportunities recognize your frequency. You don't defend your choices because your choices align with a destiny they can't interpret. You're not trying to be understood, you're trying to be accurate. And accuracy in identity is rare. It requires dismantling illusions, outgrowing narratives, shedding versions, forgiving betrayals, and facing shadows without flinching. Most people don't take that path. You did. And that alone separates you in ways they're not prepared to acknowledge. But the deeper truth, the one that scares them most, is that your identity dismantled the relationship they had with your old self. They weren't interacting with you. They were interacting with the fragments of you that no longer exist. And now that the real you has arrived, they don't know how to behave. The dynamics they depended on are gone. The power they held has dissolved. The assumptions they used to navigate interactions with you are obsolete. They're standing in front of a new architecture with outdated blueprints, trying to understand a structure that no longer matches their memory. And that cognitive dissonance creates fear. Because identity at this level doesn't just change how you operate. It changes how people must approach you. They can't talk to you the way they used to. They can't guilt you the way they used to. They can't manipulate you the way they used to. Your clarity ruined the leverage others once held. The moment you chose authenticity over approval, you broke the psychological chains that kept you accessible to people who never intended to honor your value. And the irony is, they didn't lose you. You lost them. You outgrew the energy they offered. You transcended the roles they assigned. You surpassed the expectations they settled for. And now they're realizing too late that your identity was never small, just suppressed. You're no longer in the business of convincing people of your worth. You're in the business of living it. You're no longer trying to prove your intentions. You're embodying them. You're no longer seeking a seat at tables built on insecurity. You're building your own spaces where your identity is not questioned, it's amplified. You're not the quiet background character anymore. You're the force they didn't account for. And forces don't ask for recognition, they generate it. Forces don't ask for permission, they move. Forces don't ask if the world is ready, they reshape the world until it becomes ready. This is what makes your identity reveal more than a moment. It is a psychological event, a spiritual rebellion, a structural shift, a declaration that the version they tolerated was never the version you were destined to remain. And as this identity roots itself deeper, as you refine the edges and strengthen the core, you'll notice the landscape adjusting around you. New people feel drawn to you because they recognize alignment. Old connections fall away because they recognize that they can no longer access you. Opportunities emerge that match your elevation, not your insecurity. Doors close not as losses, but as protection. Your identity is becoming a filter, separating what was meant to leave from what is meant to rise with you. And in that filtration process, you begin to understand the magnitude of who you're becoming. You begin to see that the shift was never just about self-expression. It was about self-ownership. Because identity at this level is not performance. It's embodiment. It's the moment you stop outsourcing your definition to people who only understood fragments of you. It's the moment you stop waiting for external confirmation before stepping into internal truth. It's the moment you realize the world didn't reject you. They rejected the version of you that wasn't even real. They rejected the diluted, quiet, half-expressed self that carried their projections like chains. But once you shed those chains, once you stepped out in full clarity, they were forced to confront a truth they never prepared for. You weren't smaller than they assumed. You were simply becoming too large for their expectations. And now, as you stand rooted in your identity, watch how the atmosphere around you becomes charged. Watch how people react when you speak from truth instead of fear. Watch how their eyes flicker with confusion when they realize the old emotional levers no longer work on you. Watch how their voices soften when they sense you've outgrown the need for approval. Watch how their passive-aggressive comments fall flat, how their gossip loses weight, how their opinions lose grip. Because once identity becomes aligned, external noise loses influence. You stop absorbing the energy around you and begin influencing it instead. You become the reference point. You become the standard. You become the atmosphere. And people feel that, even if they pretend not to. Even if they hide behind neutral expressions and rehearsed indifference, their subconscious responds before their ego can interfere. Human beings instinctively react to authenticity because authenticity carries a frequency that cannot be faked. And when you carry that frequency, the world becomes honest around you. People reveal their intentions without meaning to. Their insecurities surface. Their admiration leaks through their resistance. Their envy becomes palpable. Their fear becomes transparent. You don't need to ask where you stand. Your identity reveals everything for you. This is what terrifies powerful people. Not the rise itself, but the clarity that comes with it. Clarity removes their camouflage. Identity removes their influence. Self-awareness removes their leverage. They can no longer project their insecurities onto you because you no longer internalize noise as truth. They can no longer undermine your confidence because you no longer place your confidence in their hands. They can no longer dictate your direction because you've finally understood that direction comes from alignment, not acceptance. And now that you've stepped into alignment, you've become untouchable in ways they never anticipated. Your identity reveal didn't make you louder, it made you sharper. It didn't make you rebellious, it made you sovereign. It didn't make you intimidating, it made you undeniable. And now you walk through life with a presence that leaves psychological fingerprints on every room you enter. People feel you before they see you. They adjust before you speak. They pay attention before they know why. And that gravitational pull isn't arrogance, it's resonance. The world responds to people who have chosen themselves wholeheartedly. The world recognizes souls that have stopped negotiating their worth. The world bows, not to ego, but to authenticity wielded with discipline. You became someone who doesn't reach for validation because you already reached for truth. Someone who doesn't fear rejection because you no longer reject yourself. Someone who doesn't shrink from discomfort because you've learned to grow through pressure. Someone who doesn't apologize for your presence because your presence now carries purpose. You have become someone whose identity is not reactive, but generative. You create your reality instead of conforming to it. You shape your path instead of waiting for permission. You define your narrative instead of surrendering it to others. And as this identity becomes more integrated, more embodied, more natural, more effortless, you'll watch the world divide itself, not through conflict, but through resonance. Those who are aligned with your evolution will rise with you. Those who are threatened by it will fall away. Those who respect you will approach with clarity. Those who envy you will retreat into shadow. Those who recognize your power will treat you accordingly. And those who cannot handle your identity will expose themselves simply by failing to adapt to the new frequency you carry. This isn't loss, it's sorting. This isn't conflict, it's clarity. This isn't ego, it's elevation, because a person who knows who they are no longer fears who they lose. A person who is grounded in identity doesn't cling to anything that distorts their truth. A person who has stepped into their full self doesn't negotiate with energies that drain them. You're not becoming selective, you're becoming aligned. And alignment always demands purification. But the greatest shift, the one that marks the true completion of this transformation, isn't how the world treats you. It's how you treat yourself. You no longer silence your instincts to protect others from discomfort. You no longer dim your light to be digestible. You no longer wear humility as a disguise for insecurity.